Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in today's video I wanted to cover a subject that can be very confusing, and that is whether or not you can keep multiple bettas together, especially the female Betta sorority. I'm going to share with you some best practices that people who keep Betta sorority successful have employed over the years. It's not to say this is the only way, but this, in my opinion, is the way that's going to maximize the likelihood of your success. As always, if you try this, make sure you have a backup plan just in case it doesn't work. Hope you enjoy the video. Appreciate you being here. So the tanks that we're going to be looking at here are from Aquascape 2021 Chicago. This is the Prism Betta booth, and they had a couple of really nice tanks. One in particular, which was this one here. It was a 55-gallon tank with hundreds of female bettas, and we're going to use this as an example in terms of how to keep a Betta sorority and maximize your success. Let's face it, these fish are absolutely beautiful, and when it comes to keeping multiples together, we are pretty much left with trying to keep female bettas together because the males are far too aggressive towards one another and males are too aggressive towards other females. So the option that we have are trying to keep multiple females together. Unfortunately, when most people try this, it fails and fails miserably. Why? Because even though female bettas aren't nearly as aggressive as males, they still are aggressive towards one another. And if you're trying to keep them together, there are a number of aspects that you have to consider before you keep a female Betta sorority. I think the first thing, and this is one of the areas that are somewhat controversial on the internet, and that is tank size. If I were attempting a female Betta sorority, my minimum tank size would be a 29-gallon, but if I were doing it, I would really prefer to have at least a 40-gallon breeder or a 4-foot tank. I think the larger the tank you have, the higher the likelihood for success. And I am fully aware a lot of places on the internet will tell you a 10-gallon will be sufficient. I think, again, if you want to maximize your success, a minimum of a 29-gallon, but if you can really go all out and get at least a 4-foot tank, you could have something special, just like you see in this video. If I were going to do a larger tank like a 40-gallon breeder or a 4-foot tank like a 55-gallon, you have to keep in mind filtration. You're going to be keeping a lot of bettas in this tank, and so you're going to need adequate filtration, but you're also going to want to have filters that have an adjustable flow. I would probably opt for keeping two smaller filters on, like let's say a 55-gallon or even a 40-gallon breeder, something in like a Chem Title 55. And by the way, I've got some filters that will do well with bettas in the description below, some videos that you can check out. These filters have adjustable flow because your bettas aren't going to want a very heavy flow. So I probably have a couple filters. Yes, you're going to need a heater on your Betta tank if the room temperature is going to be below mid-70s. And so ideally we want to keep these fish right about 78 or so. The other thing to consider in what you're seeing in this video is how the tank is set up. To maximize your success, you're going to want to have places that block line of sight in case there's one Betta that's maybe getting picked on by another one. So you've got rocks, you've got wood. In this particular tank, lots and lots of live plants. If you don't want to do live plants, you could do plastic plants, but you do want to have the tank with a moderate amount of decorations. Rocks, wood, plants, castles, whatever you want to put in there. Just make sure whatever decorations you add don't have any sharp edges that could tear Betta fins or scrape up their bodies. Something else to keep in mind when you're adding the fish, and we'll talk about this in a second, you're going to want to make sure that your fish tank is well cycled. If you don't know what that means, the video in the upper right hand corner will help you through that process. I will also put a video down in the description that will show you how to get a tank cycled very quickly and very safely so that your bettas will have the highest likelihood for survival right when you add them. Now, when it comes to the bettas themselves, and I think this is where a lot of people, when it goes wrong, this is where they get it wrong. As you can see throughout this video, we have a 55-gallon tank that has hundreds of bettas in this 55-gallon. You do want to overstock this tank. Now, for those of you who have ever kept cichlids, this is not an uncommon thing. We keep a lot of cichlids in our fish room. and it's not uncommon to keep our African cichlids heavily stocked to actually cut down on aggression. I think one of the main reasons why Betta sororities fail is there are too few bettas in a fish tank. Ideally, what you're going to want is at least a betta for every couple of gallons. And so that means if you're going to be doing a 29 gallon, you're going to want 14 or 15 bettas in that tank. If I were doing a 55 like you see here, I would easily have 30 to 50 bettas in that tank. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow enough individuals where they're really not going to want to vie for dominance as much. They're not going to have necessarily that territorial aspect because there are just so many fish that they would have to chase away. And again, this is a very common thing we do in the cichlid world, and it really does help when we cross this over into the Betta sorority world. This is also the reason why I say you're going to want a larger tank. It's at some point the volume also becomes important. If you were to try to do this with a 10 gallon and maybe even a 20, where you've got 10 or 15 bettas in that very small volume of water, there just isn't enough space for them to have a little bit of swimming room, and so it's just bound to cause problems. So larger tanks are going to be better for this. Thus, at least a 29 gallon, ideally a larger tank like this, like a 55, is even better. The second thing you're going to want to consider is the size of the bettas and the types of the bettas. As you'll see throughout this video, most of these fish are of similar size. Ideally, you would want to add fish that are on the younger side, so they're going to be a little bit smaller. It would be even better if these fish were siblings. A lot of people report being able to keep siblings together with a lot less aggression than if they're trying to get bettas from all kinds of different sources, but that may not always be possible. The best option is to try to get the bettas around the same size. You should also consider the color varieties of your bettas. Fish, generally speaking, if there's going to be aggression, will be aggressive towards other fish that look similar to them. So if you can get a wide variety of colors for your female bettas, that may help cut down on aggression. And you're definitely going to want to watch these fish as you add them to the tank. Make sure that there's no one fish that's really getting pushed up into a corner or being relentlessly chased by another one. Again, what we're doing here is we're laying down rules that are going to maximize your success, but it certainly isn't going to guarantee it. And so if you've got one fish that is absolutely a bully that is just terrorizing every other fish, you may have to remove it. If you've got one fish that is just being beat up by the rest of them, you may have to remove that fish as well. So it's really important around that first week or two to watch your community and make sure that they're getting along, relatively speaking. They are going to probably chase each other around. They're going to flare at one another. What you're looking for is fin nipping, is fish that are biting other fish, that are bullying them, preventing them from eating. That's the type of aggression that we may have to step in and do something about. Also, be prepared. Even using these best practices, sometimes you do all the things that you think are right and it just doesn't work, and you have to be ready to have a backup plan. Now, when you are adding your bettas, it's best to try to add them at roughly the same time. So if you're going to be, let's say you've got a 29 gallon, you're going to add 10 or 15 bettas to that tank, do it all at the same time. But again, that means that that tank needs to be well cycled. Now, once you've added your bettas, there are some things that you can do to minimize aggression. The first thing we've already talked about, blocking lines of sight, giving bettas a place to retreat if they're being picked on, giving places that a betta can go to if another betta is bullying them where they can't see them as much. So you've got your rocks, you've got your wood, you've got your fake or real plants, but there are other things you can do, such as how are you feeding your bettas? It might be best to feed your bettas 2 to 4 smaller meals every day, making sure they eat all of the food. I have found fish that are well fed tend to be less aggressive. We feed all of our fish, including our bettas, North Fin flakes and North Fin pellets. You could also consider frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp. We have found our bettas, even larger ones, really like live baby brine shrimp if you want to give them a treat. So all of these things fed smaller meals over multiple times a day can help reduce betta aggression. You're going to have to keep an eye on your water quality. Make sure that you have no ammonia and no nitrite. Make sure you try to keep your nitrates maxing out at around 20 parts per million. If it's a planted tank, you can go as high as 30 parts per million. I try not to go too much above that, so it's important to test your nitrates, and that will help guide you as to how much water you're going to be changing. If you want more information about how to change water and what we do, that video in the upper right-hand corner will certainly help. Now, we have a ton of good betta information in a playlist. I will put more betta information down in the description below if you want more info, as well as the videos in the upper and lower right hand corners. If you've had success before, would love to hear from you down in the comments section below. What did you do? Appreciate you being here, and we'll see you in the next one.